We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right. Happy afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hey, welcome to the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where you know that safety at the expense of liberty is slavery. We have a very special episode for you tonight. I can't wait to introduce our guest, and I can't wait to talk to him. I'm really looking forward to this. Been looking forward to this a long time. Some of you may know him. He comes from a very small channel, but if I would like to introduce Dr. Chris Mortensen from Peak Prosperity. What's going on, Chris?
Gary?
How are you?
I'm well. I've been really looking forward to this as well because, just our couple of phone conversations. I just like how you think, right? We're here to find the truth, and we don't have any pet ideas. They're just data, and we try and stack stuff up. So that's what I'm here to do. I just want to talk about everything, and wherever it leads is where it leads.
Absolutely. And, that's the one thing, ever since I started posting about this stuff, I've been flooded with, you got to go check out Peak Prosperity. You got to go talk to Chris. And I did. And then, I reached out to you guys and luckily Nick kind of contacted me, and I'm just glad we were able to bring this together, because here's whether or not we agree 100% on one thing or another, what I think to be true, and I'm pretty good at read on people, is that you are after the truth. You're sincere in that. I know I am. And, whatever we can do to work together to get to the truth, and regardless of conspiracies or this or that, what we have is we have a government that absolutely failed. We spend a lot of money in tax dollars. We should expect more. We should get more, and people should be held to account. And I hope that at least in some small way that, you and I can team up and work together to make sure that that takes place, that the truth from them gets to the American people, because they deserve it. And, if worst case scenario, if nothing else, if that never happens, we have a record. We have a record of what took place. We had the record of what people were saying during this time. And, if 80 years from now, we're still into the, JFK situation, people at least have a lot more information than they did now. And kind of what I like to do, Chris, is just kind of step aside. I was telling you, I know you've been busy. I have your notifications on YouTube, and about every 4 hours or so, I got another new notification of new content coming out. So I haven't been able to keep up with everything that you've done. And I know you haven't been able to keep up with everything I'm doing, because we're both, I'm running about 3 hours of sleep over the last 4 or 5 days. So I can completely understand that. But what I'm gonna do is just step aside, and I want you to kind of talk to everybody. If you will, just take a second to introduce yourself for some of my viewers. Maybe some people don't know who you are or what you do, and then we'll just go from there, Chris.
Well, sure. So before I start, though, it's really important to me, like the thing that I care about here is that there's two critical functions that you've been performing and I've been performing. And the first one is just getting this recorded in real time, because things tend to get lost, and it's just really important to have that record.
Absolutely.
And the second thing is, I want to get data out there that's going to force the people who, this is the full belief system on display. I think that the natural instinct of Washington, D.C. bureaucrats is to lie and to cover up and to not admit failure and to do anything they can to save face. And so part of what I want to do is just get facts out into the record, so they have to confront them. Like, they can't. It's easier for us if they have to fit their narrative to our facts, which are just the facts, rather than vice versa. They come up with some story, and then later we're going, that's not how it was. First mover advantage. So I'm really proud of how fast you moved. I moved. A lot of people moved to just get this recorded. This is like Dealey Plaza, but with 200 cell phones. It's a pretty good deal.
No, 100%. And one of my biggest regrets when it comes to this type of situation was the Las Vegas shooting. We still don't have answers for that. And I'll tell you, if there is a conspiracy to be had at a minimum to withhold information, there is nothing bigger that you can point to than the Las Vegas shooting. I have my own theories on that. Now, a good friend of mine, his wife was killed during that event. He lives right down the road from me. He and I were actually at First Special Forces Group together. We served together. I ended up moving here. And then several years later, he was retiring. He gave me a call. He's like, Gary, are you in? We live nearby Martinsburg, West Virginia. I'm like, yeah, this is where we're at. He's like, I'm retiring. I'm from there. And I didn't even know that. It was just this weird coincidence. Well, he gets here. His grandson goes to the same school, had the same class as my kids. So we saw them every day. And they went to that Route 66 concert every year. And oddly enough, we knew that they were going. We were following them on Facebook. We knew they were there. And then we saw what took place that day. And we're like, oh, God, I hope they're okay. But, the odds of it being someone that are just so slim. But come to find out, she was hit and she died in his arms. And I didn't pursue that the way that I should have, because I was trying to be respectful. And I also didn't want to seem like I was trying to capitalize on all that. But I have a lot of regret on that. And I wish I would have went after that, because I think there's a story there that most people don't realize. And I have my own conclusions, and we could probably do a podcast on that all over again. But, I think this is so important, because I do think that we have agencies that are completely overtaken with political activists. And we already see some of the disinformation coming out where they're trying to turn this guy into a Republican, trying to turn him into some anti-immigration person. And we can't allow that, right? We got to put a stop to that. And this is one thing that you and I have talked about, and I think that is definitely true. And I see it more and more. I do think that there is a real effort, an information operation, to undermine and to remove the credibility of any of this stuff. And I think there's bad information being put out. I think there is bad theories being seeded into this conversation that will turn everybody into a truther or a birther, or in the moment that it comes up, because the left has been so effective at this. And I say the left, but I also mean the U.S. government. They've been so effective at this. And besides just the U.S. government, we can say, hey, there's these operatives within the U.S. government. We also have an entire political party that wants to paint this in a certain way. And they have a lot of resources, assets, capabilities. They can, I keep getting footage that I am convinced, just knowing what I know, is some of it's just fake. And I think that is coming from those actors. And there's also folks out there that just like to play pranks. They can create a bunch of, they can manipulate footage, put it out there, and they think it's funny. So, there's a lot, this is a multifaceted issue that I think people need to be aware of, be careful about. And you've taken a very systematic, scientific approach. And I just really appreciate the work that you've done. And I think, you're a voice worth listening to, and a voice worth teaming up with in any way that we can help. I'd like to get out there to Butler to look at some things. I would, anything that we can do together, I'm all about it. So what I'd like to do now, outside of anything else you have to say on that matter, is kind of give you the floor. And I'd like to see a kind of a summary of where you were, what information you have now. You were sharing some fascinating information with me right before we got in here. So I'm going to give you the floor and get out of your way.
Well, there's so much to chew on. Like you say, this is multifaceted, Gary. So I too am convinced that there's a lot of bad information out there, and I can track it in two ways. One, people are just putting stuff out there that frankly just doesn't make sense. And even after I prove that it doesn't make sense, like people are saying, oh, this is a drone, right? And you see it in 2 frames, right? And I'm like, okay, if that's 1/30th of a second per frame and it moves across the whole frame and that's 100 feet of space, this thing's moving 400 miles an hour. It's not a drone, right? And you can prove that, it doesn't matter. And so then I see that once that bad information gets out there, whether it's accidental or somebody's well-meaning but misguided, or it's an intentional actor, I don't care. But once it's out there, I watch these swarm bots, I call them, come in and amplify it. And it's there to take us off, get us arguing about stuff that doesn't matter. It's there to get us fractured and running in different directions. And so actually, I think one of the key skills in this is to know when you're being BS'd and how to avoid it. Because you can spend a lot of time on the wrong rabbit hole.
Absolutely. I think that is the intent here, is number one, to undermine the credibility of anything. On top of that, just pure distraction. So I think you're 100% right. A couple of things I want to let people know over there in the comments, as far as how I'm going to run this. We're going to talk for a while. Number one, I appreciate all of your comments over there. And as long as you keep it respectful and not disrespectful, look, we're going to let them stand. With that being said, if you're going to be disrespectful, you're getting off the feed. It's just how that works. Secondly, if you do want to throw a super chat when we get to the point where we are taking questions at the end of this, we will prioritize those super chats because we do appreciate the support. And with that being said, Chris, I'm going to give you the floor, and I know you got a lot of information to present, and I'd love to hear it.
All right. Well, I never answered your first question. So who am I? Chris Martinson. I got a PhD from Duke University. It's from the Department of Pathology, but toxicology was my subspecialty. And I did a lot of science. So that was, basic science behind a microscope. And that's where I learned, Gary, I fell in love with, like, you don't fall in love with a hypothesis. You develop a hypothesis, but the data. And if the data doesn't work, if you're a good scientist, your hypothesis sucked. So you got to dispense and start over again. So I'm very used to that process. I have a lot of training, and like, let's just give this a go, right? Pathology. So I did autopsies. You talked about the Route 66 thing. The first thing that caught me on that, when somebody said, you got to look at this, I wasn't really in that frame of mind when that happened. I wasn't thinking that way. But the first thing that caught me was, he said, what do you think the odds are of two people being in the hospital with 3 chest wounds with a bump stock from 350 yards? Now, I've been a shooter for a long time, 4 decades. I don't know how long now. I've shot a lot of rounds. And bump stocks I find inherently uncontrollable. But from 350 yards, the chance of one person having 3 rounds in their chest, I was like, that's kind of small. But 2? Now I'm starting to have trouble, right? That's just very odd. 350 yards on a 40-degree down, it's a long ways away. That's a tough shot.
It is.
So that didn't make sense to me. So then I started looking into it, and there's a lot that doesn't make sense there, obviously. So here we are. I also have an MBA, and so I like numbers and stuff like that. All right. So for the past 20 years or so, I've been doing this thing, Peak Prosperity. I came up with this worldview. We have to look at things from a systems level. And all of that said, my training aside, it's all meaningless. My number one skill, Gary, is I can smell BS really quick. And I don't know why, but I know it. And so then I start to back solve, like, why is this BS? I just know it, right? Like watching Ronald Rowe acting as Secret Service director, watching his testimony is just pure BS to me. I'm just like, it was odiferous, right? So this story had a problem, very early on. It's Trump. And one of the first things that made me say, oh, I have to look into this, and this is how I work, was watching my Twitter feed light up with maybe people, maybe trolls, but sorry he missed.
Yeah.
Right. You remember that? I mean,
I'm still
3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So that really caught me off guard, because that speaks to the first layer of this thing we're analyzing, which is the degree of psychological operations that had been layered upon this man, Trump, who's now such a mirage, or just some sort of, he represents something to people that they're willing to say, sorry, he missed. And so that just speaks to the level of animosity that had been ginned up. And I don't consider it's not organic, Gary. I think somebody is actively promoting and pushing that, and it worked. And it's convinced a lot of people that this is the new Hitler. And of course, if you could go back and shoot baby Hitler, people say, yeah, I would do that. So there's something going on here that I said, okay, maybe he wasn't getting the best of coverage. Worse, maybe somebody let it happen. Triply worse, maybe somebody made it happen. So that's sort of where I started this. I'm saying, okay, null hypothesis, if you call it the thing you're going to try and disprove or prove is this is a lone kid. He had no help. He fired 8 rounds, and 2 other shots came back, one of which took him out. That's the starting hypothesis. So I started digging into it, and the audio was really confusing because the first 3 shots are completely different sounding. They have different wave characteristics. I have people telling me, analyzing it at levels I can't, that there are different echo characteristics suggesting a slightly different location. There's a lot of things that just don't actually line up from that. So that's still an ongoing investigation. Like, what do we really know? At a minimum, I know we've thrown enough of that data out there with enough questions that the FBI report, when we get it in 2059, will, we'll have to account for that. So, good move on that. But as time has progressed and I've gone on further and further, I've really started to move away from the 2-shooter hypothesis at this point. So we had the Dave Stewart video. I know you know all about that.
Yeah.
Really important video. And from that, I could conclude that the lower windows were closed because I can see all the reflections. And then guess what? People said, hey, Chris, hold up. He got picked up by the state police. He was detained. His phone was taken away, and it was transferred to the FBI. And 4 days later, he got it back. So we have a chain of custody problem. If you're in the MyHop territory, okay, put an asterisk on it. But given what I see, I see all the windows are closed. So we have to rule that out. Now I don't have a spot for a second shooter unless it's out of those windows on the second floor of that 2-story building to the side. But there you have angle problems because I can really pretty carefully account for the shots and all the shot angles and where they line up. So particularly it's the first 3 shots that matter because we have this one thing, Gary, that's like it's the only ballistics I'm positive about are Trump's ear got nicked,
Yeah,
and it clanged off of a railing up in the back.
correct.
Right. Now you can draw a line. Now I'm really disappointed that you and I can't drive to Butler and the stands are still there, and you and I can put our eyeball right on that railing and have the 6'3" guy stand on the stage and just see where we go. I would have loved to have been able to do that. So we're busy recreating that in 3D CAD space, but now it's a little wiggly. Like, are you sure you got the right, stage height right?
There's some room for error at this point.
Yeah, now it's getting questionable. So I don't know. But then we had this crazy video just came out yesterday, shot by James Copenhaver, right, of crooks running across the roof line, right?
Yeah.
That's an intense thing right there because now we can begin to account for how he must have gotten on the roof, his path across the roof, how much time he would have been visible to who. I found that really extraordinary. What did you make of that?
I didn't know really what to make of that. Other than it was extraordinary. It's extraordinary to me that he wasn't seen. He wasn't seen by more people in the crowd. I think that's one of the things that kind of gets lost in this. We see all this footage, and you have to understand, and I know you do. You guys are in front of cameras all the time, but when we're filming things with these that essentially have a pretty wide angle camera, it makes everything look so much further away. Like 140 yards is not that far. I think if you guys were out there and we were out there and we look at the actual distances, it's going to look like it's half the distance of what our perception is looking at some of these, wider angle shots that we've been seeing. And even, looking at when I first started looking into the water tower theory, which was driving me nuts. One of the first things I did was actually space out, hey, how far is the water tower from? And I saw what that distance was. I'm like, man, it looks so much further to me on this video and in this camera. It is not that far. It's like, especially when you see the new video from Dave, where he's panning over and you see the water tower. And again, we're still dealing with a wide angle camera that makes things look further away than they are. That's still like a stone's throw away. It is not that far. So, I think, and I keep seeing the name John Cullen come up in the comments, and I've seen his stuff, folks. I just tell you right now, I disagree. I don't know what to say. I mean, when you look at, just like Chris talked about, when you look at that bottom floor, it is inconceivable to me that there are any shots that came from those windows. We had a line of people out there. You have a fence in there. That building is in a defilade or depression. Like having a clear shot between the people that are there in front of it, the fence, and the fact that there's no open windows, I just don't think that there's any shots coming from that lower bottom floor. And not only that, we have people now, and we have video witness of, again, people right in front of that, 50 feet away and less, that if there were shots coming through those windows, you would be able to tell and see. I'm just telling you that right now. There's a big difference when you're 50 feet away from a building, shots coming up from down here, and there's shots coming from down here. It's a very different thing. And I also don't think if we really looked at the trajectories and had a better idea of the elevation of some of the different elements that we have in place, whether it's Trump, which was about he was about 11 foot off of the ground, from what I can tell, his head. He's 6'4". He was on what I looked to be about a 5-foot platform. And then that building down in defilade some, so I think there's some more. There was a lot of people, and I get it. There was a lot of people in a rush to tell what their thought was on this. And I immediately had all kinds of people contacting me, knowing my background, asking me to give an assessment. And I'm like, look, I was a sniper. I've done counter sniper operations, but that is very different from what Secret Service does. And I would be remiss to get in there. I don't know what their SOPs are. I don't know what their capabilities are. I don't know. There's a lot of specificity that goes into, even if you did the exact same mission and you go from one department to the next, trying to trying to sharpshoot them, I think is just a wrong path to go down. And here's another thing. I know there's been congressmen and everybody else talk about, they were former snipers. There's a big difference between someone that has went to sniper school and has actually done sniper operations. There's lots of folks in special operations that get a chance to go to sniper school. I don't know of one legitimate sniper that has real time doing operations on the military side that would say that the water tower is a good spot for a sniper. Number one, that tells me you've never been on top of a water tower. Folks, that railing is about 18 to 24 inches wide. There's no room for you to maneuver up there. You can't even get a 50-inch gun. You can't get a tripod up there. You can't get a good, and not on top of that, you're now dealing with shooting at an angle. And for those of you who don't know, when we're talking about what we call high angle shooting, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more complicated than shooting along a straight gravitational line. So, there's all kinds of reasons why that didn't make sense to me to begin with, which, I ended up spending all this time. I ended up taking on this role of like kind of going through these conspiracy theories and saying why this doesn't make sense and why this doesn't make sense, with the intent of getting everybody on the same page and hopefully us being able to agree on a certain set of facts so that we can have a straight pathway going forward so that we can pay attention to what's really going on. So I don't even remember how that rant started, Chris, but that's where I'm at.
Well, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble. So I've been avoiding Cullen for a while, and he's been very upset that I've been avoiding him. So read that however you want. But I do have a lot of people saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So here I go. I'm just going to wade in. I'm going to step in the hornet's nest. So if you could show this up full screen so people can see it here. So this just came in this morning, right? And what we have here is Cullen put out this thing where he said, this is just from today, and today is August 1st, right? He said, we found another shooter on Trump's site on his right, 3D kill box confirmed. And he has this picture of what he's calling a bullet. But I stepped through it, and it's there in 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Okay, so then you just do some simple math and you say, well, 4 frames, 30 frames a second, that's 0.133 seconds. That means this thing's traveling 30 feet per second. Gary, how many bullets travel 30 feet a second?
All of them. Jesus, most of them. Like my kid's Nerf gun up there is probably around 30 feet per second. I just want to point out, Chris, you're a complete nerd. I just want to lay that out there.
Come on, you're not seeing a bullet. You're not. You have to get the slow-mo guys. You need to get your 120,000 frame per second camera. You want to see that bullet. You know what I'm saying?
Well, speaking of which,
I'll wear the nerd proudly. I'll take it because it's like
that is 100% a compliment to you. Along those lines, I've been inundated on X today, formerly known as Twitter, I've been getting questions. Gary, what do you think about the fact that the first round almost hit the sniper team? And what we're talking about is, in what I was sent was the video of where you see the northern sniper team flinch when that first round goes off. Yeah. And I was like, I think it was somebody that was unprepared, that knows what gunfire sounds like, and basically had an involuntary reaction to something that they know is a threat. I mean, that if like most people that have experienced gunfire, but now that you're not expecting it, you're probably going to flinch. I would, if I was in combat and I'm ready for it, there's been lots of times that gunfire is going off. I'm like, oh, we're getting shot at again. Not a big deal. But I think complacency is a major component of that. And I think that explains some of that. But what was included in that video, and I haven't had time to do any deep analysis because I kind of wrote it off right off the bat, was, oh, you can't see the trace. Look, and for those of you that, if you do any long range shooting, look, we see bullet trace, right? There is a disturbance. It basically is a heat wave that goes through the air that the bullet creates, displaces air. Now, I spend a lot of time and effort because we promote these long range courses, and trace looks really cool. I spend a lot of time and effort trying to capture that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I'm saying is I have never seen trace captured from an angle like that at an oblique angle. And you clearly see, so that tells me, I'm automatically suspicious of this. When you are trying to see trace of a round, you got to get directly behind or within a degree or two of that bullet path so that you can see it. And it's just, I've never seen it off to the side. What we see now, we do see that round captured in a picture with Trump. But what we're talking about there is we have a camera that is, I don't even know what the shutter speed of that thing was.
1/8,000th of a second is what
What
they're
was it?
saying. 1/8,000th. It was set at its fastest speed.
There you go. So that makes sense. We're not seeing trace. What we're seeing is a streak of the actual bullet. Somehow he got lucky. And there's cameras perfectly capable of doing it. And that's another thing. People say, well, you know, this is really suspicious that somebody was on the ground that was able to get this. Folks, how would they have a camera that can do that? The average really good camera that a photojournalist is going to have, this camera that I have in front of me, it's not that good, but it's pretty good. And I don't have my livelihood is not tied up into getting good photos. So it doesn't surprise me. There's nothing suspicious in my mind that we just happen to have a photojournalist covering a political event of one of the most polarizing, but also most headline grabbing person on the face of the planet right now, taking, you know, high speed photos, especially during an event like that. So that, to me, there's nothing suspicious, but that's my point is I am 99% sure that that footage was manipulated to show some sort of trace. And on top of that, there's nothing that indicates to me, and you may have different and conflicting information, please let me know, that we ever saw rounds going toward the counter sniper teams within those first 3 rounds. I'm open-minded to see whether or not we saw something around that with the other 5 rounds. But for that to happen in the first 3 rounds, it is so unlikely. And I think we have a pretty good account of where those first 3 rounds went to. So, you know,
let me add to this. I'll tell you. So I'm not a sniper, never been one, haven't even been to sniper school. But let me tell you what I saw, and I'd love to get your reaction to this because here's how I put this together. Right. So yeah, full frame this up again. So this is from the pre-action report that they went through. So presumably the Secret Service had put themselves on the map and ESU is on the map. So everybody knows where everybody's supposed to be on here. Here we got Hercules 1 on the south barn. Here we have Hercules 2 on the north barn. Hercules 2 is one we're talking about. They flinched, right? The so-called flinch.
For those that don't know, Hercules was the code name for the counter sniper teams.
Yes, and I learned that from this document. I was just calling them Team 1 and Team 2 till this. But yeah, Hercules 2 is that forward one. They're both sitting there. We're watching them. They have their glasses out. They look confused. They jump. One of them, the guy in the closest to us, the left guy, jumps a little when that first round goes off. So here's how I understand that. First, they know up here that there's some ESU there's Butler and Beaver County CERT people up. They know there's people in this complex who are friendly. So they got that. Worse, there's a different part of the same document shows them actually are supposed to be on the roof in question where Crooks was, right? So if they have any kind of a map with them, they look at it, they're like, well, I know I got friendlies there because they're on my map, right? And then this is from Spa Guy did this great video drone flyover, and this is from exactly the spot where Crooks would have been. Look at the shot profile that Hercules 2 has.
Yeah.
Come on. That's a hot mess. There's just, so I know they're like, who is that? Friendly, not friendly. They don't know what they're looking at. They're glassing it. They're thinking hard. They're trying to figure out what to do. And then a shot rings out. Of course they jump. Of course they do. And, you know, Hercules 1 is their zone is south, right? We know that they were supposed to be there. They are. They're facing south. They're like, yep, that's their zone that's what they're supposed to be up to. These guys are facing north, and they had this little tiny window where Crooks would have run across. But if they weren't looking there at that exact moment, which is possible because they're trying to cover all of this territory, but if they, you know, and plus they know this is in friendly hands. So I can understand this. This is what they can't see on the red line. Here's what they can see in terms of that's the amount of time they had to watch Crooks. By my best guess, it's about 3, maybe 4 seconds of him hustling across about 60 feet of roof that they could see. That's all I got on that.
Don't mind. Let me speak a little bit to that too, Chris. Is you know,
please.
I know it's easy for us to, and I'm not making excuses for the counter sniper teams. What I'm trying to do is provide some context, because I know right now we're focused on that roof, and I know everybody's like, well, it's so obvious to me. Well, it's really not. If you were out there and your sector of fire is about 180 degrees, you have so much cubic footage. We're not just looking near, far, high, low, like we're looking at the whole thing, right? 360 degrees, all the way up to what the horizon down. And again, we're also looking underneath trees, underneath overhangs. Look, if I was going to do this operation, a trained sniper, and we're, as a counter sniper operation, what you're always trying to say is, where would I be if I was going to do this? If I was a sniper, where would I want to set up? The last place I want to get on, quite frankly, is a roof, because you are such an open silhouette, especially on a white roof, which is essentially a light colored roof that we have there. So, the more realistic looks, or the way to think about this is, number one, we have a lot more cubic footage to look at in that person's sector than you would think. And then on top of that, where I'd be looking is underneath trees, underneath overhangs. The other thing I'd be looking for is vehicles. Like if I'm doing this, we saw the DC sniper. That is a classic, urban sniper method of concealing your position, is inside of a vehicle, going through a window, in the back of a room. Those are the places that are much more obvious. And besides the fact that where he set up, whether it was intentional or on accident, I think it was just kind of common sense. He's kind of peeking up above the roof, like, oh, I see him. I keep moving over. I don't see the guys that are looking my direction no more. I kind of think that's where that is. But I know it looks very obvious to people, but when you're actually up there and you have such a large sector to cover, and you have all these things grabbing your attention. You see this person over there doing something weird. Now you're looking over there. You're looking through the binos at that person. Then you see another person over there. Now you're looking through the binos from there. And once you're in those binos, you got very little situational awareness outside of what you see in that very couple of degrees of location. So the idea that, they should have only been looking at that roof, I think you're missing the forest through the trees. So that's just my thought and kind of experience with that. And I think I want to be fair, right? I want us to have an approach to this that is fair to the guys on the ground, because I think they were set up for failure. And I think overall their response within what their responsibility was, the counter sniper teams, was good. I think we have obviously some really major breakdowns with communications. I shared with you, and I'll try to touch on this while being as careful with what the information I was given. One thing I can say, everybody's seen the female that looks like, I don't know, she looks like a clown out there, right? And I know there's been some reports that the shift, that personal security detail, was augmented by Homeland Security. That is incorrect. Every single one of those people out there were 100% confirmed Secret Service. Okay. Now, the thing to understand is when they say those were, whether they're referring directly to them or they're referring to other people, saying that they're Homeland Security, it's like saying the Army is DOD. Homeland Security, Secret Service, does fall under Homeland Security. So just so we're clear on that. Now, there were Homeland Security investigators and personnel out there, but they were manning, or that's very sexist these days. The personnel doing that were actually the ones doing the magnetometers and things like that. They were out there controlling the access points. Everyone around the protectee is 100%, and just take my word for this, or not, I don't really care. They were 100% Secret Service. Also with that woman that we see, she was the shift lead. She was the one that was running. She was the agent in charge. Number two, she is the one that conducted the advance. She did an abbreviated advance. Now, when you guys sit there and say things like, or including me, like, why were these people, why were the counter sniper teams positioned where they were? One thing I will say when it comes to that woman, for better or for worse, and whether or not she's competent or not, she was the one that was able to push for, and at the last minute, get the counter sniper teams. They were not originally scheduled to be there. So that woman, from all the information that I've gotten within the Secret Service, pushed hard to get those folks out there. They were actually given permission to get us counter sniper teams out there that Thursday night. And they didn't fly out till Friday afternoon. I don't know if they flew or not. I know they didn't get there till Friday afternoon. Typically how an advance works, and if you haven't seen my full interview with a former counter sniper team member, I really recommend. I think it will educate you a lot. It will also tell you how big the failures are, because the guy that I have on there is former Secret Service and a former counter sniper team member, he is not in any way being given a defense for what what took place or making excuses. He said he was ashamed, because the way this is supposed to work is when you do have an advance, you have elements from every team. So we're going to have CAT team members out there on the advance. We're going to have people that are going to be on the shift on the advance, and people from the counter sniper teams. But that's not what happened. We had an abbreviated advance that was conducted by that lady and a couple of other folks. Nobody from the CAT teams, nobody from the counter sniper teams. It was those individuals at the last minute that threw in those positions. Typically, the counter sniper teams would determine where they're going to be, and the CAT teams are going to come up with their response plan, all those things, because the CAT teams don't know all of the specifics or the duties and responsibilities and the capabilities of the counter sniper teams, vice versa, and definitely not somebody that is a shift lead at that point. All right. That lead is essentially a supervisor. They are not necessarily the most tactical, they're like a captain on the police force at that point. So, those people, the counter sniper teams didn't get to choose where they wanted to be. They didn't get to choose where their sectors of fire were. They didn't get to choose their position. And I think things would have been different had those assets been allocated sooner and a proper advance had been done. So that's kind of where we're at on that, Chris.
Interesting. I have this one picture here. Well, it's actually a short video. This is actually from that first meeting where they came out, where you said they scoped the site out.
Look,
this is from the pre-meeting. There she is, right? There it is. So some local news outfit was out there, KDKA, taking a look at this whole thing and watching them do a walkthrough before that went down. So I think, but that looks like Special Agent in Charge Tim Burke out of the Pittsburgh office for me, and there's that lady. So they're both on site. If
you're gonna have an abbreviated pre-mission meeting like this, you're gonna have the lead there, and it makes perfect sense that she's there. They should have had everybody. But quite frankly, again, the way that this was, I know this was hastily thrown together. I mean, all those elements may not even been on site at this. I don't know when this was taken. Do you know what the time is and the date? I believe this was like a week before, but don't hold me to that. Yeah. Well, that confirms what I've been told. I have never seen that before. So she was the one there conducting the advance, and she doesn't know she's making decisions for people that have specialized capabilities. And they aren't there to say, hey, no, that's not where we need to be. We need to be over here. And normally the way that would work is you'd have all these elements go out, do their own advance with their job considerations in play, and they would come back to her and they would tell her, hey, this is where we want to be. And she would say yes, no, or, typically what I've heard is that you're never going to have a lead say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna put you over here. But what you do normally get is somebody to say, hey, this is where we need to be. Roger that. But she's down there making all the decisions. And at that point, the counter sniper teams weren't even in play because they were not approved at that point.
Yep. Well, so if I could, I just want to play. So Milk Bar TV put out this incredible compendium. So with the Copenhagen video, right? You have to start the timer. Like, when exactly was he running across relative to the speech? And then Milk Bar TV stitched it all together and gave us this run from basically that moment forward, where all the different things that we've been seeing. I think this puts it in the clearest possible view so we can finally understand what actually happened, at least from the moment Crooks is on the roof till the 10th shot. Before that, I still have some questions we should talk about, like who exactly was supposed to be in that Overwatch building and who gave them permission to leave, or did they just walk off? I don't know. I got questions, but barring that,
sounds good.
Let's just take a quick peek on this one. Let me see if I got I got my volume up, so this should volumize.
He's a valiant fighter. He's a great gentleman. So we're going to bring him up can we bring him up for a couple of minutes later? A little bit. All right. You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. I'll get you up here. The world will see a vibrant Republican Party that is bigger, stronger.
Skipping ahead.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look.
Thank you.
There he is right there. Right there. See him? He's laying down. See him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
Instead, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a senator elected and to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's not easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. And it's much tougher than if it happened. We had the strongest border ever. If you want to really see something to say, take a look what happened.
Listen to this. I hope he's turning this way. Be careful, guys.
You hear that last shot?
Yeah.
Oh, like that's the people like, oh, okay. So to me, Gary, that puts it all in really clear relief. So what I see now is Crooks runs across the roof. He comes up, he transoms, he takes a good look around. Somehow he's not really seen by anybody at that point. He disappears from view. And then the next thing we see him, he's over on it. His back is to us, right? He's facing away on the roof over there, but where his backpack was, I'm pretty sure my interpretation is he's assembling his rifle. Like it's somehow, he's got a screw off barrel or whatever he's got. So he's reassembling it. And then, because then he flips over and now you see a gun, right? People are like, where was the gun? Well, it could have been in his backpack if he broke it down, right? I guess. Sure. And then he starts bear crawling up and then he puts his gun over the transom, right? And we see him in the Dave Stewart film. You can see him up there. Now we see him even from there. So he's pretty high up on that roof line. He's got to be over the ridge. I think his barrel is probably out there. He's going to take his first, most careful shot. That's the one that came within an inch of taking Trump's life or leaving him scrambled permanently. That's the one that nicks past his ear, clangs off of a railing, right? And then there's two more shots. Both of those go left. So this consistent with somebody, maybe not fully trained, snatching the trigger a little, but he's shooting left, hits David Dutch, hits James Copenhaver, resettles himself somehow. And now we get those 5 quick ones in just 0.77 seconds. And then just 0.87 seconds after that 5th shot in that 5 string, you get that snap that comes back. I think that took him off his game. I think that's why he's skinnied back down. That's why he's not on the roof line. He's 4 feet back from the roof line, but he still had a little something exposed. And that's where the Hercules team, I think, took their shot there at 15.8 seconds in. That's how I interpret it now.
Yeah. And again, your timeline and mine are like within a hundredth of a second each other. So I think we're looking at the exact same set of facts. And I agree with that, and I told you this before, is like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, everybody has a plan and they're feeling really good until they get around and go flying over their head. So I think you're right. If the ESU team or the local law enforcement snipers took a shot at him, if that's the one that we hear, shot 9, that makes perfect sense. And then we see that shot 10 come down. And, I did get confirmation. The word is that my thought on that, my original analysis was that I thought that the counter sniper team took 2 shots. They took the one at that 5.9. They see that they missed. They reacquired the target and took another one, were successful. I've gotten confirmation back that there's only 1 shot fired. So again, everybody can take that for what it's worth. So, all of that makes perfect sense to me. And if you guys didn't get to see, we had a eyewitness on this morning at 10:30. I highly recommend you go watch that interview. I think he saw, this is what he told us. And this goes back to the second shooter theory. He said, look, when the shots were going off, I wasn't sitting there counting rounds. He's like, but what I can tell you is I did see muzzle flash. And specifically, he saw muzzle flash come from his location during the first 3 shots. And then there was that brief pause. He's like, it felt like forever, even though it was, I don't know, like a second and a half or something like that. So he went to go stand back up because all he did was crouch down. And then he saw muzzle flash again from his location, looking directly at him during those 5 shots. He's like, again, I can't tell you how many rounds it was or anything like that, but I did see muzzle flash from that first set of shots and muzzle flash from the second set of shots. And I know that contradicts some of the audio stuff out there. I don't have a good answer for that. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I'm just wondering, where exactly was he positioned?
He was about probably 2 degrees to the shooter's right. He was almost directly in line. At the beginning of that, I play a video. Matter of fact, let me see. I will actually. I have that. I will show you the video clip of his that I played. And because he was taking video right after the shots were over, he was still in that spot. He moved. He was basically right next to that guy, Dave, that was taking footage. Here we go. Let me see if this is, I believe this is it. I'm going to open this. There's 2 videos. I'm not sure which one this is.
That's nice and stable. That's not Dave's.
No.
It was vertical. His was horizontal. So this is different.
Down.
This is,
So that's after.
Threat 1 is down.
That's after the last shot then.
this is, hold on, I'm going to play another one. Remove this one.
Yeah.
I am literally right between where Trump was and the shooter.
Yeah, and this was again after the shots finished. He actually moved over to the tree. He was behind the same tree as Dave, but that is not where he was when the. And again, even from that position, you can see that he obviously has a good line of sight and is extremely close to where those shots took place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my best guess based on this is what I'll analyze and see if I can get some audio experts to confirm. So based on this, what seems most likely to me then is that Crooks probably bear crawled up till he had what he considered to be an adequate line of sight. And he was smart enough to know that your red dot's a couple inches, inch and a half above your barrel. So he crawled up enough, but he's still possibly behind the ridge line, maybe just on a nice, stable elbow down pose.
Yep.
He takes his first 3 shots. Doesn't work out. We have almost 2.5, 3 seconds. I think it's 2.7 between those strings. He crawls up a little further, locks that thing down on the railing and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because those in that string of 5, Corey Competore, I'm 99. I have high confidence. He's hit by the middle one. That's shot 6 in the overall string because it was 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6 is where he got hit. And Gary, the rest of those are so close to the mic, they're really causing it to misbehave. It has this damping function when it gets too overcharged or whatever you call it.
Crack.
Yeah, it's picking up those cracks. So all of those are good enough that they are down in a box down there. I don't know how big that box is. It could be pretty wide, but that one on Corey Competore is right in line. The reason no Secret Service get hit in that because our 3D, we did a CAD reconstruction as best we could because unfortunately the FBI dismantled the whole thing before we could really do it. But the best we could do from pictures and taking every possible angle we can, that north stand that Corey Competore was standing in, that is now defending the president and all those Secret Service. I think that's in the way. And also for that shooting out the lower window, I think that stand is completely in the way. So actually, I don't think there is a firing solution towards Trump or the Secret Service pig pile there from the position Crooks was in. I think there's a stand in the way there.
It makes sense to me. I mean, regardless, the fact of the matter is, even if you could see the pile of people, what we assume is his primary objective is no longer visible. So, that doesn't, another thing we haven't discussed too, the other possibility is, when he went to go fire that string of fire of 5 rounds, he may have put his barrel right onto that ridge line. And if we are putting a barrel onto that ridge line for support, the actual metal barrel, not the handguard, is going to greatly deflect those rounds. And that's something that go look on YouTube, go to the X-Ring channel. I don't know that we've ever done that, but I could show you very quickly the moment that I put my barrel up against something hard and I'm leaning into it, it's going to deflect those rounds and wildly change my point of impact compared to my point of aim. So those are all things to think about as well. And again, obviously all of this is speculation. But I think it's a reasoned approach, right? I think it helps some of the stuff that we don't know make a little bit more sense, because there's lots of possibilities that I think that people that are very plausible, that are more plausible than some of the things being pushed forward. So there's lots of reasonable possibilities out there that I don't think are being explored the way that they should be.
Well, I agree. And a big question mark for me is this whole idea that there was a municipal cop gets boosted up, has a gun pointed at him, drops down, seconds later, shots ring out. Just not from that perspective, but from Crooks's perspective, like he's got to be a little amped up, right? Unless he's just downed a whole bottle of Xanax or something, right? He's got to be a little hopped. I'm just having trouble with the whole swivel, point a gun at a LEO, come back up, compose yourself, and do the shooting he did. I don't know that I would be a shaky ass mess at that point in time. Sorry for my French, but
No, I think most people would. I guarantee you, if the idea, look, I'm 100% open to the idea that we have a situation like we had in Michigan where, somebody trained this guy, somebody coaxed this guy into this, they provided material and support for this guy. I'm down with that. And again, he might have been smart enough. Last night I talked about, the standard trajectory. If you've zeroed your rifle AR-15 at 25 yards, basically what you're doing is a near ballistic zero of 300 yards. So the highest point in that trajectory, max ordnance, is around 140, 150. So at 150 yards, your point of impact is 7 to 12 inches above your point of aim. Now, he may have known that, but I'll tell you, I train people all the time, both civilians, military, and law enforcement. And then after every course, we train all these different tactics, techniques, shooting techniques, different things. And then we have a culmination exercise, a stress event, right? Where now they have to put these things into play. And as soon as that timer goes off, nobody's shooting at them, cops aren't looking at them, that timer goes off, they lose their shit. All right. They go out there and they do everything completely wrong. So even if he was smart enough to understand the difference in ballistic trajectory, what he should have been, I would have been aiming at Trump around the belly button, the navel, so that I would hit him in the chest. If he was aiming at the chest, he's going to hit him right around the ear level. I mean, that is almost exactly where we would expect to see that round impact. So he may have known that. Maybe he did, but under stress, we go back to our normal. Now I'm dropping down to center mass. All right. Which is going to, or again, he's not aiming low enough to compensate for that difference in bullet trajectory. So he's aiming at the chest and we get a shot at the ear. No trained sniper, or very few trained snipers, if they are shooting even at a target at 140 or so yards, typically, if it makes sense to us, we're going to go for a high center chest hit, not for the head, because of the problems that we see with the head. It's a smaller target. It moves a lot. I don't know. They might get lucky and turn and look at a graphic to one side and you only hit his ear. So there's lots of good reasons why you don't aim for the head. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that you've been really good about, Chris, and that is taking a systematic approach to this. And look, I can tell you right now, if I want views, I can come to all kinds of crazy conclusions and say that I know this, or I still think there's a second shooter, and I could post a different video and every single day about a different location where a second shooter could possibly be, and I would get millions and millions of views. But my integrity just won't allow me to do it. And I do think, guys, like, I don't know who Colin is, but I do think that if you're going to get on there the day after and come up with a theory that is so easily proven wrong that there are shots coming from the bottom window, I think you are I think you're out over your skis. And I think I'm not going to talk about what his motives are. I don't know, but I think that's the wrong approach. And that's just my opinion on it.
No, I agree. And so the data first led me to be very certain there were two shooters, because the sounds were completely different. The audio signatures were different. Everything was different. Plus we had two specialists out of Colorado State University, or forensic audio experts, and they said same thing, right? So that seemed like a good starting point, and everything was confirming that. I can show you and I had 4 separate sources, 5 now, I have 7 now, but I had 4 at the time I went out and said, okay, this looks like two shooters, right?
Right.
And I think that was too much confidence for what I had. But I mean, I had 4 independent sources saying, look, these are completely different things. Right.
No, look, and I'm completely, look, I go into these things like this as default. I'm wrong. That's what I think. And I'm being sincere about that. And I'm willing, completely willing. Here's my problem with that. The only evidence that suggests there's 2 shooters is the audio analysis. I don't know the first thing about audio analysis. I don't know how perfect that science is. I did have a call the night that you and I talked. Later that night, I got a call from an audio engineer. He told me the same thing. He's like, look, here's what I do. This is what I do it for. I'm telling you, Gary, those are 2 separate sound signatures. And I steel manned him to death. I said, well, what if, I talked about my theory, putting the barrel in front of that ridge line where we now have a resonator pushing this way, or we pull it back. I will say, when I did mention that, he's like, ooh, I didn't really think about that. He's like, but I don't think that's what it worked. But what I can say is that, like, he also didn't go back to the lab and test that theory out. I also talked about, hey, if we did that on top of, moving the barrel in one direction or another. We also talked about, like I talked about with my first guest, where we talked about going junkyard prone, where you turn the gun sideways to get a lower profile, where now you have an ejection port sticking up. I don't think that happened. I think there is enough video evidence and eyewitness evidence that doesn't indicate that ever happened. So there has to be another explanation. But my point is that there is fairly good evidence that says there's 2 shooters through this audio analysis. There's just nothing else that I've seen that points in that direction. And I could end up being completely wrong, and I'm willing to come back and say, hey, I was wrong on that. I'm okay with that. I just think that what I also think is there might be an explanation of why those sounds sound different, because eyewitness testimony, what we know to be true, or just the facts on its face don't suggest a second shooter. I also have, whether it was coming from that bottom window or rounds coming from inside of a room behind him, I think on the ground there would be people saying, hey, look, those sounded different. I didn't see muzzle flash. I didn't hear what was going on. I think from on the ground, and I've done a lot of shooting outside of windows, and I've been on the ground while people are shooting outside of windows. You can tell a difference. I mean, immediately. I think there would be so many eyewitnesses saying, oh, that was clear to me, unless they were running suppressed. That's where things get a little dicey. But those rounds weren't suppressed. I don't have.
Well, this is still an open question for me. And here's where the 2 shooter thing started to fall apart for me, was I couldn't find a place for the second one, particularly when the Stewart video came out and I saw all the windows are closed on that first floor. Well, now it's a real stretch, Gary, to get into those other windows that were open, by the way. And I don't know that they should have been on that Overwatch building. There were 3 windows facing 100%. Trump open, one open the other direction. I have complaints about that, but I couldn't make the trajectories fit, right? But still, I have 2 audio from the side that the first 3 shots are distinctly muffled compared to the next 5. So that would be consistent. And by the way, the ones out front were all kind of similar, but you can still say they're different enough to say we have differences we have concerns about. But that would be consistent with somebody shooting out a window, the sound's going that way, everybody recording down that way is getting sort of a similar view, but somebody to the side is not. So I don't really have any. Only thing I have left, and this isn't even a Hail Mary, this is just like I have to rule it out so I can sleep well, is there's a window on the east side of that Overwatch building. It's open when the video was taken of his body. There's a helicopter flying around. There's a window on that east faces the parking lot. It's open, right? Did Crooks come in that 2-story building, go up some stairs, come out that window? Did he climb up the back, up that little shack? We don't know, right? But that window is open, so that would be the only place I could think where you could shoot from, get a similar trajectory, muffle the sound, But it's such a stretch, because now somebody has to basically lean out a window? That's your pro? I don't know about that.
I think this is what I would love to do, and maybe between the 2 of us, we could make this happen. What I would like to do is to get to the truth, we have to eliminate what isn't true. I think that's really one of our because we're not going to get straight answers. Even if the government came out tomorrow and gave us a perfectly truthful answer, we wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it. I know you wouldn't, and nobody should, because the government's full of shit. They're always, at a minimum, they're going to cover their ass, right? That's a fact. You know, there may not be some grand conspiracy to kill Trump. There may have never even been a conspiracy or efforts to deny him resources. But what they are going to do is they're going to lie to us to hide their incompetence. That I think we can all agree on. No matter what report that we get, it is going to lack any trust from the American people. What I think we could do, and I think that if we can get support from law enforcement, we can get support from whoever owns that AGR building. Maybe we can call BlackRock themselves. I guess they own that. But, you know, if we could get either even blanks, but we get shots from both locations to see how different those sound both. And I would love to have, if we could get, you know, cell phones and as close to the same spots as we currently have. And then on top of that, get eyewitnesses down there and then get shots from those locations. I think that will at least get us closer to the truth. I don't know. And I'm willing to look at that. What I will say, what gives a lot of credence to the audio analysis is that we have so many different locations that we do know that are showing the exact same anomaly. I will 100% say that. So trust me, folks, I'm not ruling out anything. I'm just saying that outside of the audio analysis, like I just don't see. And here's the problem that I have too with the second shooter theory. Basically what we're proposing, and tell me if any of this is wrong, Chris, from what you've heard on the hypothesis of the second shooter. We have a patsy that we're going to pin this on. And so we put them out there. Maybe we've coordinated with them. Maybe we don't. I don't know what's going on with that. But then we now have some sort of government agent that is highly trained, highly capable, has the full resources and backing of the U.S. government on the dark side, which, trust me, folks, that stuff exists, right? There are absolutely elements within our government that are accountable to absolutely no one, that are doing shady shit all the time. And we are now trying to pull off one of the biggest operations that have ever been conducted on that side of the house, and that is, you know, to kill a former president and to make it look fake. Maybe it hasn't been done since JFK. And then we get said trained shooter in there, and then at a target 140 yards away, we miss. Like, not only miss once, but twice and three times. Because I will tell you, the average good shooter that was up there, you can get lucky, or the target can get lucky, and you can miss the first time. There was plenty enough time for a follow-up shot to take Trump down. And so that's where this falls apart. Like, what we have is, for this major operation that we're going to conduct, we decided to pick two shitty shooters. And that's where this whole thing falls apart for me, because that just doesn't make sense to me. But again, Trump could have just been lucky. I mean, he really could have been.
So for our screenplay, you know, that we're writing about this whole thing, right? So let's imagine this though. There's a shooter. It's a team actually, and they're coming in and they're pros, and this is what they do, right? First off, they're like, "Hey, we have to demonize AR, so you're gonna have to use the 223 round." They're like, "Not my first choice, but okay, if you insist." So what if somebody on that team was a patriot and they turned the top dial 4 clicks to the left? Guy misses. He's a pro. He's like, must have turned his head, takes a second, misses, takes a third. Now he's like, peace out. Something is deeply wrong. Like, they could have had a targeting error. That's the only way I can account for it, because for the second shot, Trump is standing here. He's perfectly immobile. You just know you missed, and you even know which way you missed. And how do you miss that second shot if you're a pro?
That's my thing. So if I'm looking through that optic and I see, and even if it's zero magnification, but I'll tell you right now, if this was a state ran operation, that whoever was shooting that gun wasn't running a 1 power, you know, red dot sight. But even if they were, you could still see that Trump reached for his ear. He gave a clear target indication. If I'm going from there, I'm like, I need to aim 6 inches right, 6 inches low immediately. Boom. And I squeeze the trigger. I mean, it's going to be that quick. So that's my problem with it. And look, to me, it's like a perfect explanation. Like, if you want to ask, how did Crooks miss? Well, man, I can come up with a million reasons. Number one, he's stressed. It's hot. It's uncomfortable. His heart's pounding. He might have drank too many freaking bangs that morning. His AR may be shitty. The ammo he's using may be shitty. He may not have actually zeroed his optic as good as the thing. The thing could have ran out of batteries. Look, we teach carbine courses all the time, and we'll have carbine level 1 on Saturday. First thing we do after a quick classroom session is we zero those rifles. Then we run drills all day long. Then most people come back to carbine level 2 on Sunday. First thing we do is, because some people are showing up, they didn't come to that carbine level 1, they came to another carbine level 1. So we want to make sure their guns are zeroed. So we have everybody re-zero their guns. And I'll tell you, you'll be shocked at how many people that just zero their guns the day prior come in that second day, their guns are not zeroed. Lots of different reasons. A shitty optic just isn't going to hold a zero. It mechanically wasn't on tight enough. They banged it around. They hit it. They changed ammo. There's 1,000 different things that can and do go wrong. And it is what it is. But I can come up with a million reasons of why. And then we talk about that string of fire that he shot. From my count, he got 5 rounds off in 0.81 that put him around a 0.20 split times. I'm a pretty good shooter, and I can shoot a lot faster than that. But even shooting at 0.20, even if I'm aiming at bleachers at 200 yards away, if I'm shooting that fast, I'm not surprised at all that he missed. And according to you, and it's probably true. I think your research is good, man. One of those rounds hit Corey Compatore, and but the fact that we don't have an account for those other 4 rounds isn't shocking to me at all. So, again, that's
if I could cover that, because maybe other people haven't seen this. So
yeah,
this is good data. So here's something we could tell easy from this took a little resolution, took a minute to figure this out. But what we got here is these are the 5 shots run real fast, and here's that 6th one out here. And these are the things here labeled 4, 5, 7, 8. These are the snicks of the supersonic crack of the round coming over Trump's mic. So this is Trump's mic's perspective. And what you'll notice, see all this background noise, see how fat this is? And then it skinnies, neck's way down, and then it builds back up again, and snick, another bullet skinnies down. That's because Trump's mic, or more likely the downstream signal processing, had a limiter, a gate. Something too loud causes that system to go into shutdown. It doesn't want to feedback from the speakers. It doesn't want squelching. It does whatever it's going. It's going to protect that. So these are in milliseconds. We see all this background noise, and then this bullet. This is shot number 4. So 1, 2, 3 were measured, and then this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 4 snicks right over the microphone. Got it. 5 snicks right over the microphone. Got it. 6 is missing. We got 7. We got 8. And so when we look at this more closely, we can see that we're actually missing 2 sonic booms down here. It caused a lot of misanalysis for a lot of people. And they're missing because the microphone system was in shutdown. It just, you didn't hear them because there was like, I'm not taking any sound in the microphone system right now. Yeah, and when we take that and when we run that against the actual video that we see, we can actually see that's Corey Compatore's hat flying off in that little red circle right there. That lines up perfectly with shot 6. So we were able to at least determine what happened with those 5 shots. Unfortunately, Corey Compatore caught the middle of that, shot 6. But 4, 5, 7, 8, those went down close enough to at least leave a hot signature on Trump's mic. So that's what we know. That's the kind of stuff we can tell from this. That's pretty settled at this point in time. So that's all in what I call my green category. I'm settled with all of that. By the way, if you draw, straight lines from all of these things, we find out that Corey, all these shots are basically in a zone where you would say, this was pretty good shooting overall. So, but here's to your point, like, how do you miss numbers 2 and 3? So this is Copenhaver here, who took that amazing video of crooks running across the roof. Yeah. Here's the railing. This railing gets hit in between David Dutch, who's circled in blue here. Here's this other gentleman wearing the black t-shirt, red hat. That round pings off right there. So it went from Trump's ear, pinged off that rail. And then we also had the hydraulic line hit. So we can see they're all here, and they're all just a little left of where they should be. I can make a story that's a inexperienced shooter, on his first big game hunt, missing.
Yeah. Chris, can you actually pull that that graphic back up real quick. And let me
Yeah.
share this. So this is another thing that I keep hearing, and it's a valid point, but I just want to try to give an explanation for this. We keep seeing, and I keep hearing about trajectories. Well, how is that bullet still rising when he's shooting from a high level to a down level? The problem with this is that we see a lot of graphics like or pictures from this where you're taking this picture from the ground looking up. Number one, it makes it look like those rear stands are a lot higher than they are. From what I can see in every picture that I've seen, Trump's head is about even with those people back there in the background. So it's pretty close to the same elevation. Those rear or side stands or the bleachers there are not that tall. And again, Trump is at about 11 feet. His head is about 11 foot. The other thing, and I need to do a little bit more analysis on this, but that building, building 9, the AGR building where he was shooting from is down in a depression. I would like to see, I need to see, it goes uphill. It goes uphill toward Trump. The elevation, the actual ground level is, I won't be surprised if we find that, and again, this is complete, somewhat conjecture. I will not be surprised if Crook's elevation and Trump's elevation, there's a lot less of a difference than people think, just because of the elevation of the terrain compared to one another. And the other thing, everybody's like, well, why is that bullet rising? And I'm going to pull out a super technical graphic for you guys real quick, because I think this is important that people understand this. This is what I was showing people last night. Look, let me move my microphone, my headphones that I dropped. Folks, when people zero an AR, they are typically zeroing an AR at 25 yards. Well, that is not, and zeroing an AR at 25 yards is not just random, right? It's not arbitrary. What that essentially is, it's the ballistic near equivalent of a 300-yard zero. So point of aim at 2,500 yards and point of impact is the exact same as the point of aim, point of impact at 300 yards. What we need to understand is that this is what we call our max ordnance. So if my point of aim is going to be here, but my point of impact is going to be 7 to 12 inches higher than my point of aim at 150 yards. So we need to understand that really we have a higher trajectory at this point because those people were probably another 40 yards or so, 30 or 40 yards roughly behind Trump.
Yep.
So now we have a trajectory that is still on the rise before it's back down on the fall. So the idea that we think that he's here and we're just, the idea that we think that Crooks is up here, Trump is down here, and that the bullet just goes straight down. That's not how ballistics work. So hopefully that is a little bit, I don't know, illuminating for some people out there. Hopefully that makes a little.
No, that's great. Oh, that's great. That's great. So he
even discuss it all.
Well, no, that's great. I mean, well, we know he had a rangefinder, right? So maybe he zeroed out at 100 yards, maybe he zeroed at 25, but if he had a rangefinder, he's probably cognizant of at least some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, he may have been completely cognizant of that, but just like I was talking about, under stress, you revert back to point of aim, point of impact. You're not thinking about, a hold off under stress. That stuff, a lot of that stuff, and I don't know this, right? We were doing conjecture upon conjecture upon conjecture. We don't know if he knew that to begin with. We don't know that if he did know that, he just forgot to do it under stress. We don't know. We don't know where he zeroed at. I'm just telling you that typically people zero at 25 yards or a 36-yard zero. Both of those result in a very similar trajectory where at 150 yards-ish, the bullet is still rising. And there's not going to be a lot of bullet drop from that max ordnance to 30 or 40 yards. It is not really on the downturn till 225 to 50, where it starts coming back in line with our point of aim. It is still above our point of aim at 225, 250 yards. And then at 300, it is now converged with our point of aim and a point of impact.
So that's such a good point. And Gary, I'll share this with you as soon as we have it. We have Norm has been running full 3D reconstruction on a CAD program, and he's got that building 6 is down about 2.5 feet, and we're taking the best, LiDAR data we can for elevation, Google Earth, whatever we can. But it's not a flat topography for starters. That building's down in a depression, and it rises for a bit, and we actually think it falls off another foot from Trump's stage, right? But then they don't probably put stands up like this. They probably have legs on them. We don't know about that either, because you're probably going to have that be a level arrangement on and on. So there's a lot of variables to account for here. So anything that's about the bullet must have done this because I saw that, that's deep yellow for me at this point,
100%.
because we're just conjecturing. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's a lot of this stuff is going to come down to understanding what happened within inches, and even trying to recreate that, like a couple of inches here, a couple of inches there. Definitely a foot change in topography is going to change the outcome and therefore change our conclusion. I don't know that we'll ever be able to completely recreate. I think if anybody's going to do it well and do it the best they can, it's definitely going to be you, Chris. But I think, your calculation for, I'm getting distracted over here by the comments. I think,
yeah,
I think that needs to be done. And I think there's some good information we can glean from that, which again will help us it'll allow us to know what questions to ask, because right now I think there's still some gray area in that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have time? I want to show you one more really cool thing that I think popped up out of. All right, cool. So this is really cool from the Copenhagen video, right? What's really awesome about this is that we have this one magical alignment from this corner of the building to the corner of this third vent stack. You can see Crook's little head skylighted against this building face way back here. Now it's all foreshortened and weird because it's telephoto, but at least we have this. So I think that leads us to be able to conclude this. When we draw a line from that corner across this third vent stack, we say he must have been on this side of the line, right?
Yeah.
He's over there. I don't care how twisty the picture is, because parallax is a problem. You can't always tell from angles, but when you have a really cool alignment like that, we can say he's over here somewhere.
Agreed.
Right? And if he's over here, maybe he was on building 6, but ducking a little bit. We don't know, but we saw him come across here and then he disappears for a while. And my interpretation is, well, he's getting down onto that thing. We saw the Beaver County helmet guy, have to hustle down and grunt his way back up out of that little depression coming across that causeway. So best guess is this is why he disappears for 6 seconds, comes back up, and we see him again, and then he disappears. So he's coming from over here, which allows us to begin to say, okay, well, how did he get up here? If he came up off of this AC unit here and he ran across here, he must have cut this way to avoid the parking lot, I would guess, because that would be smart, right? Or he must have come up this backside and come across this angle, but we know he passed through this red circle somehow. So that gives us some really interesting things to talk about. And my concern is from the after action report that we got from Chuck Grassley's website. This is from the Beaver Butler County folks. They said, look, we took a picture of the kid out of this window here. He's on that retaining wall. Somebody saw him at this picnic table. Here's the bike and the backpack. But this really causes me heartburn, Gary. Last known direction of travel, right into this courtyard nook where there's an AC unit, which means he probably came up here, came across here, and that was his whole path. So that means he was up on the roof for a long time, hucking around. And I kind of, in my better world, I like to think somebody would have noticed that, but maybe not.
Yeah. Again, I think there is a real possibility that, again, the counter sniper, you would think they would see that, but they could have been in binos at that time looking at something else. And he just got lucky. But the other part of that is maybe, I don't know those counter sniper team members, maybe they let it happen. Maybe they are stooges of the government and we're completely okay with that. I don't know. But I do know that, I mean, we know what we know. And then the rest at the end of the day is supposition at best.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to the beginning of the story where we started, we know that There are enough people who had been convinced they hated Trump strongly enough that they were sad that the shooter missed, right? We know, playing the odds, that about half of those people work in the government, right? Just if you say it's about 50-50, Democrats, Republicans, and Democrats are the ones who mostly feel that way. So we have to know that there's at least a non-zero number of people, Gary, in the government who really, on a very visceral, I bet difficult for them to explain level, just despise Trump. I mean, hate him, like, and would feel like, maybe I'm just guessing here, like they would be heroes.
And a lot of
to some people.
And a lot of Republicans in high places. They and I'm telling you this because I know people in the government that are lean toward conservative or whatever else. They hate Trump more than some of the Democrats do. They really do. They think that guy is a real threat to whatever, their control of the government, how the government operates. There's this whole, Trump wanted to hold, GS personnel and other direct hires to the government responsible. Those people are absolutely impossible to fire. You can't fire them. Look at this. Look what Peter Strzok. Look at his malfeasance and what happened. Yeah. Not only, well, we fired him, but then we paid him $1.2 million. It's absolutely crazy that he's talking about what he's talking about on a government device with no expectation of privacy, and yet he sues successfully the government. How many of us can sue the government? How many times have we seen that, where the government has been sued successfully, but yet Peter Strzok having conversations, having an affair, putting that stuff over a government device where I've owned many government phones. First briefing that you get is that you have no expectation of privacy on this device whatsoever, and that all of these correspondence will be read. That's the way you need to treat it. This is the government's property, and we have full access and control of this. And yet he was able to successfully sue the United States government for $1.2 million because they violated his personal privacy. Absolutely insane. Anyways, I digress.
Yeah, but that's because he's on the right side of the narrative story, right? Because if you're on the wrong side of the narrative story, like, I found it shocking to me that Rudy Giuliani loses a $140 million defamation lawsuit against these two women. Now, defamation, I felt at one time in my life, I felt like I was defamed by somebody. So I went and talked to a lawyer, and they just spanked me down like the kid I was. They're like, look, you have to prove damages. It's pretty hard. Yeah. Did you lose any money? Can you prove it? Like, no. So I'm trying to think, in what universe do these two low-level functionary people out of Fulton County lose $140 million? Future income? It's just, no, if you tried to bring an equivalent lawsuit the other direction, you'd get laughed out of court instantly. So we know there's an asymmetry to this story, right? It's not evenly balanced right now.
No, and we see that with how many of the people within the Trump organization and his own cabinet have been successfully prosecuted with really novel prosecution, right? Like, it had never been done before. These are all process crimes that you could prove and could prosecute anybody in any administration that has just never been done before until it was Trump. And there's clearly there's a government that is clearly pointed toward one side. The scales of justice are definitely on one side and not the other. There's just no doubt about it.
What do you think's at stake here?
What's that?
What do you think's at stake here in this next election?
Let me tell you what I think is at stake with this situation. Then we'll get to the election. I think this is the last possible chance that we even have anything close to being able to hold the government accountable for anything. I think if they get away with this, how big or little it is, if the American people aren't outraged enough to hold the government account for this, then we will never see accountability ever again. This is our only chance. We have a government that is completely contemptuous of an American people that even think that they would dare to try to get reasonable, honest answers from their elected officials and from the bureaucrats that are put under those elected officials. This is our last chance at being able to do that. That's what I think is at stake with this situation. That's why I don't want to let it go. Now, am I under any delusion that's going to happen? Probably not. I mean, we've seen Benghazi, we've seen January 6th, we've seen all these different events where we have these Republicans that I think are just as bad as the Democrats get up there. They grandstand, they get everybody amped up. We're going to hold these people accountable, and it doesn't happen, and it's all political theater. So that's what I think is at stake here. As far as the election goes, man, I think we're on the verge of losing our country. I think we've gotten to a point to where we have two groups of people in America, whether you want to call them Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, whatever you want to call it, that we've gotten to a point where our ideologies are completely irreconcilable. And I'll be honest with you, I've been saying this for a long time. I will be surprised if there's not a civil war within our lifetime. I'm so concerned for this country. Look, 9/11 happened. A couple days later, I was in the recruiting station. I spent another almost 10 and a half years in the military. Most of that time was in special operations. I love this country more than I can even express. And I love this country. I don't love this government. I think this government is just an offense to what this country actually stands for, the Constitution on which this was founded, and the principles that we were founded on. This is no longer a country of, for, and by the people. It is a country, it is a government. Is it not a government of, for, and by the people? It is a government that is setting themselves up to dominate the people through mass media, that's why they want to take your guns, folks. You can't control an armed populace. I think, that's what this channel has always been about. I think one of our most important civil liberties, human God-given rights, is to be able to not only own a firearm, but I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I truly believe that the intention of our founding fathers was that we had a population that had the same capabilities as the U.S. government. And I'm not talking about nuclear and all this other stuff, but what I'm saying is that, I don't believe that there should be any ATF. I think the ATF is the most wholly unconstitutional organization that's ever existed. I don't need to ask permission to own firearms. I don't need to ask permission to own full auto firearms. I don't believe in any of that. So, because if we have a government and a police state that has such capabilities that far exceed the population, again, we do not have a government of, for, and by the people. We have a government that is set up to dominate the people, and that's where we're at. And so that's where I think we're at in this election. I think that if Trump is reelected, it may put a pause on things. It may delay what I think is ultimately the inevitable. And and you're a financial guy. Between the debt and everything else, and how spread out we are militarily, and how we're just giving more and more money every single day to other countries to start wars. The military industrial complex is a very real thing. We may have already crossed the precipice, in my opinion. And that's what I think, Chris. I think we are in bad shape, and I think the only chance of turning things around are two things. Number one, Trump getting reelected. That's at least puts a pause in things or slows things down. And the other thing I think is really consequential, that I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it needs to, and that is term limits for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the biggest things that we could do to realign our country. The problem is that we declared independence from Britain, who was a aristocracy, right? We had kings, this monarchy, and all these people making these laws that weren't affected by those laws, so therefore that didn't matter to them. And that's where we are today. We've gotten to a point where all our politicians are an aristocracy that are making laws that don't affect them, because they don't have to live in the real world. They're lining their pockets, and whether it's taxes, whether it's a government regulation, whatever it is, they don't understand how those affect the very real effects of our ability to improve our lives. And that's what has crushed the American dream.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I think this one's for all the marbles. I really do. And it's not just it's Kamala versus Trump. It's different than that for me. So the way I look at this, I've been struggling for a long time with this, Gary, and this is as close as I've gotten, because it's not left right. It's not Democrat Republican. As you mentioned, there's scoundrels on both sides of that story.
100%.
So it's not, that isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that our founding fathers were smart enough observers of human behavior and history that they understood that people get together under the best of intentions. Your Google, your motto is don't be evil. And somewhere along the way, you drop the word don't from that story and you become, well, let's be evil, right? And your motto is just totally changed. It happens. It just happens. So they knew you had to have a correction mechanism built in, because you let people run long enough in a big company, it loses its way. It forgets the crap floats, right? You end up with an overrepresentation of like psychopaths and self-dealing people. I don't know what it is, but this is the problem I see. This is the clearest I can get. It's not commies versus capitalists. It's this. Some people live in a world of abstraction and other people live in a world of reality. Okay. 100%. The abstraction people, they're over there. They're like, oh, effective altruism. And I care about gender, this or that, but they don't care about people with, fingerprints, retinas, and names, right? They care about the idea and they want to defend the idea. And so they're like city councilmen from San Francisco. And they're like, oh, well, let's raise the shoplifting limit to 950. What could happen? And then, well, more shoplifting. So then they get confused because their abstraction's wrong. So they double down. They're like, well, let's raise it to 1,050, right? They can't get over back to reality. So when I see a Trump rally, I see people grounded in reality. They
100%.
Wake up, they go to work, they drive trucks, they take care of kids. They are just out there in reality. And that's the battle I see. The abstractionists, they want us, you have to have fealty to this idea, like climate change. We're going to have to lock you down, put you in a 15-minute city, give you a central bank digital currency and a universal basic income because climate change, right? It's an abstraction. But we're out here living in reality. So that's the great battle. And you're right. I don't see these Venn diagrams overlapping a whole lot anymore. And that's when civil wars happen, when two groups just don't have anything in common anymore.
No, we don't. I mean, our ideologies are so diametrically opposed. Again, there's no reconciliation between those two. One either has to exist or the other. There's no way, there's no compromise, there's no ability to compromise. Because as I see it, and again, I don't doubt that liberals see it the same way, like we can't coexist because you want to take my guns, you want to take my freedom, you want to control what I have to say. Like there's been too many people that have shed blood for this country to make it the greatest country to ever exist on the face of this planet, for me to step aside and let that happen. Just like you said, it's ideology over people. We're going to take, this idea that every time that we put out this proposal that, in 10 years, the world's not going to exist because of climate change, nothing really changes. But yet, even though this abstract idea, we're willing to let millions and millions of people die, to suffer, to live in poverty because we're going to increase the cost of energy. We're going to, remove resources from people, all of these things. And on top of that, we have the US government sending hundreds of billions of dollars to places like Ukraine and Israel. Look, I back Israel 100%. Do I think we need to be sending money to Israel or any other country to defend themselves? No. Israel's been around since 1947. Let them figure their shit out. We have too many problems here. We have too many veterans killing themselves. We have a healthcare system that has gotten worse since Obamacare by a lot. I can relate to that. There's so many problems here that any politician that is sending money over to our own tax dollars and send it to somebody else so they can feel good about themselves, stealing from us to make themselves feel and look charitable, is a freaking disgrace. And I'm just sick of it. And, it comes down to living in reality. The reality is I've been careful about talking about different things like this. For many that don't know, number one, we own a training company. That's what we do. So we train military, law enforcement, civilians. And on top of that, we have a FFL class 3. Look, man, I am very concerned about talking about these things. And next thing I know, I'm getting audited. We've seen that with the Biden administration. So many FFLs have been shut down, taken out of business. The left is so good at subverting people's rights through underhanded means and through bureaucracies that I don't think people realize what's going on. There's people losing their livelihoods, losing their business because of the efforts of the current Biden administration, which was built on the foundation of the Obama administration. Things changed in 2008. I think that's when we saw that's when I saw a big difference in the military. The reason I got out of the military was because of political activism within the military, what they were doing to special operations, how they were tying our hands. I could go on and on. We could do 12 more podcasts on just that, but we're in trouble and people need to wake up. And my hope is that we have time to recover. And I'm not that super optimistic on that. I think, you know, like I said, I think the reality of us having a civil war within this country before my lifetime is over, is greater than not. That's how I feel about it. And I think that, depending on what happens in this election, especially if there's more fraud like there was in the last election, I think we're right there on. I think bad things are going to happen. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I completely agree. And we've got you know, a lot of what I do, Gary, is sort of problem definition. I point a lot of these things out for people, but I don't care about problems unless you have a solution to follow in. I think everybody needs to get ready for that hardship, right? And so when I was doing all this COVID coverage starting in January of 2020, I ended it kind of cryptically with like plant a garden. You know, why am I telling people to plant a garden? You know, why is it time for victory gardens? Because I can easily foresee that the number one way they can control people in the future is food. That's it. You know,
Yeah.
and we're watching them take all these steps to control our food supply. The cows fart too much. You need to eat more insects. You know, chicken farms turn out to be very explosive. Those Molotov chickens, you know, really caught us all off guard. You know, it just, we're watching all these things. And if it looks like and feels like an attack, it is one. And
I
you
agree.
mentioned something very important. The left, so I predict the future a lot. And people are like, how do you do that? I just read what they say and I believe them, right?
Yeah.
It's like they tell us what they're going to do. So they say, oh, the right, we're very worried about the violence from Nazis, right? But that process punishment you talked about, that is violence. When you take somebody's livelihood away, that is violent.
Mhm.
Okay. When you silence somebody, that's violence. There's all kinds of violence. There's political violence. They've weaponized the DOJ. That's the path we're on. So everything I'm doing, and I'm hoping that's why I've put so much energy. So I've slept so few hours in the past 3 weeks on the Trump thing, is because it's an opportunity for people to maybe wake up. Because if
I
you
agree.
look at it for what it is, at best, it's not, I can't get to, it was incompetence that extreme. It had to have had some fuel at a minimum in there, which says, we're not going to give our best effort protecting that guy.
No, I completely agree. And you know, the thing is like, you know, people talk about conspiracies. And they talk about, one of the things I love hearing people say is like, you know, the government's too incompetent to pull off a conspiracy. You know, I think there's a lot of incompetent people out there, but at the end of the day, that is the best coverage for conspiracy. We think all these forward-facing people are extremely incompetent, and they are. But there's a lot of really smart, brilliant people in think tanks and liberal think tanks. And I think it's pretty, if you go back 20, 30, 40 years and you look at how the progression, and I say that in the least favorable terms, where we were as a country and where we are, if you don't think that was intentional and that was a you know, a long-term plan that was put in place, and through incrementalism we got there, I think you're just foolish. We have some people that are genuinely trying to deconstruct this country in ways that I don't think people understand, and I don't think people really understand what's at stake. We have, you know, we're at a point to where we're not going to turn over a country to our kids and their kids and enjoy the freedoms that we had. We have normalized the removal of freedoms in a way that I never thought the American people would accept. I never thought that, you know, during something like COVID, that we would actually have people not only sitting in their house and doing exactly what the government tells us to, but then telling on their neighbors, and then going up to people and like, where's your mask? And like, when I look back, we always talk about, how did, you know, Nazi Germany come to be, you know, where you have probably these very normal people, and within a very short amount of time, they're radicalized to the point to where they believe that killing Jews by the millions is absolutely not only acceptable, but it's the right thing to do. I saw exactly what happened. I saw Nazi Germany taking place right inside of our country, where people were turning their neighbors in, where they wanted them to be punished because you didn't wear a mask, because you didn't do this, because you didn't get, you know, vaccinated, because you weren't following the line that the government told you to follow. And it was disgusting to me, and I was ashamed. Yeah. So I think we're in trouble, man. And I think the more people that we can wake up, and I think this is an opportunity to do that. And I know you do too, I feel such an urgency to get this message out. And part of that urgency is like, folks, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by things on the water tower or this or these little things that are probably faked. stay focused on, regardless of where the facts lead us, follow them, but we got to hold the government accountable. And I think this is our last chance to be able to do that. And that's why I feel like this is so important.
100%. Complete agreement.
Chris, you ready to take some questions?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go up here. We got some kind folks that are contributing over here. We got Pete's Guide. What are your thoughts on the picture taken from the counter sniper rifle on the wooden bleachers? Was that team Secret Service? Did they take a shot? I guess I could actually put this up here. Did they take a shot? I'll let you.
I'm not sure. Do you know what picture he's referring to here?
I don't know what picture. I keep hearing about a counter sniper team. What I think we're talking about is, so most of the guys that were running. Okay, let's clarify.
Oh, these might be the people in the back.
Yeah. So the guys in multicam are not Secret Service. So the ones in camouflage are not Secret Service. The ones in all black are Secret Service. And another little tidbit of information I think people find helpful is it is standard operating procedure that if the counter sniper teams don't have a threat, they're scanning for potential threats and just doing their, looking for keeping good situational awareness. They're in binos. They're not on their guns until they have a suspected actual threat. So the shots that you see with them looking in binos, they have no, their SOP would indicate that they have no knowledge of a threat. It's when they get on the guns. But anyways, the guys in black are Secret Service. The other guys were local law enforcement. So do you have anything to comment on that, Chris?
Yeah, I think maybe this is probably it. Because we know there were a couple of teams way back here, and we had a picture that who was it? Armed America? Somebody put it up. And I think we had a picture from way back here. I don't have any data to suggest that they took a shot. This is 1,050 feet from here to here. Mm-hmm. So that would have left a very distinct signature. People say, oh, that could have been a suppressed round. The answer is no. Even if you got a full can, one of the best cans on a 308 or a 300 Win Mag, you're still leaving 120 decibel bark. If you were shooting subsonics and you had a can, you're not taking a 300-yard shot with that and hoping for much, I don't think. But
I agree.
What do you think?
No, I agree with that assessment. Your range is definitely limited. Let's see. I saw a perfect clear film of the water tower, and the dark spot is a natural artifact that would appear, then disappear. No one on the water tower. I completely agree with that. We have a highly pixelated. We have a highly cropped image of the water tower, and if you guys watch that water tower image, we have a lot of heat mirage distortion. So we have optical distortion due to atmospherics. And then the entire water tower is moving in that. I mean, it looks like the whole thing is shifting, left and right. And of course, that shadow at the top. The other thing that I don't think people understand is that within all these phones, there's a lot of different software built in to sharpen, enhance imagery, and that causes a lot of problems, especially when we're zoomed way in. It is shifting that image around, trying to turn it into something that's not. I mean, it's literally trying to turn it into a person. But I never saw anything that appeared to me to be a water tower. I mean, a person on the water tower. And then when I get that same footage, someone sends me, Gary, check this out. You can definitely see someone, they have a gun. You can see muzzle flash. Those were the emails. Those are the comments. So you're either crazy or you're part of a problem, or you're part of a disinformation campaign. And I don't know what else to say about that.
No, they took that one frame from that Mirage moment, right? And then said, oh, it kind of looks like a person, right? But that's dishonest, honestly. You can take out of a really pixelated thing, you can always find a shot that's a little tells you something you want.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah. So 140 yards, you take a picture of me and there's going to be one frame in there. I'm going to look attractive, and it's clearly false. It's just all wrong.
Or you're going to look like Bigfoot, The recent angle release of the shooter running on the roof appears way too high to hit the hydraulics. Please go and verify. I think the different in opinion and headshot results. There is no spray from 300 Win Mag. So two things there. Number one, I think I kind of addressed the difference in that. Again, what we have is a muzzle trajectory, or we have a bullet trajectory that's still on the rise. I would have to be there. I would have to, we'd have to do some pretty good 3D mock-up and play all this. And I will say, look, I referenced Mike Bell's imagery a lot. I think it's pretty good. I also think that, it doesn't take into the ballistic trajectories of what I was talking about, right? So we have a natural parabolic arc that's going to take place with that. I don't think he's included in that. He probably is not a ballistician. So there's little elements, and there's definitely room for error and all that. And again, I will tell you right now, I've gotten some things wrong on this. I think pretty minor stuff. One of the things that people kept beating me up about was that I said that the shooter had pants on, and then he was on the roof. I said, hey, really what I was talking about, the question that I was trying to answer was the fact that how was his rifle removed from him when it was moved? Why is it so far away? Well, the answer to that is any law enforcement or EMT that's going to go up there, the first people on what they're going to do in case this person's still alive is they're going to remove that firearm within reach of a suspected threat, whether they look alive or dead. That's just common sense. And then during that, I was like, oh, looks like he's in boxer shorts. They got him trauma naked. They probably tried to treat him. I threw that out there. And of course, everybody's like, oh, he was always in shorts. I got that wrong. I saw an image prior to him climbing up there from very far away, pixelated. I realize now that his shorts and his legs, pretty much the same color. I thought they were pants. I got it wrong. So when I corrected it, I don't know what to say. I don't know what else to say to that.
Yeah. Oh, the last part of that though, that bothers me a little bit. If there, I can't account for this, that the back of his, so he was presumably face down, although he landed on his left side. We have that image of him. He's still cradling his rifle. You can see half of it across the roof rib. So he landed on his left side. And I fully expected that whole back. It really bothered me, Gary. I was there. I was yelling that the Beaver helmet cam guy's coming up, and he's walking right up the lane next to him. Like, dude, you're stepping in brain matter. Like I was yelling, like this is crime scene contamination. Like you're walking right up what should have been a cone of gore, based on the scenes that I'm familiar with. Right? Pathology. We looked at a lot of pictures. Like even somebody eating a 9mm will leave a little bit of a spray. So I was like, where's all at that part? I'm still a little like, where it is, where is all this stuff that I was expecting?
So, yeah, there was a picture that you and I talked about. I would like to see more on that before I came. Look, my experience with gunshot wounds is that you kind of have the typical and then the atypical, and there's a huge spectrum in between there. There's like, the only thing that falls outside of that there's pretty much just one typical thing is 50 cal. But I can tell you what I've seen is 308 rounds to the face that you don't see what you think you're going to see. You could have depending on the angle, depending on the type of round used, depending on what physiology that bullet hits, like it changes all of that stuff. So it is not always like, hey, I'm going to hit you with 300 Win Mag and your head's just going to explode like a balloon. Sometimes it does. But I've just seen, there's been times when I've seen 5.56. You go up on, you're like, oh my God, that was 5.56. That blew that dude apart. And his face. I remember one guy got shot in the crotch. Actually, he got shot in the butt with a 5.56 round, and I'm sure it hit his hip and a bunch of skeletal structure. But we thought he was just wounded. We got up on him. We rolled this guy over, and like the whole front. He looked like he was hit with a freaking grenade. Like it was just completely torn apart. Never seen that before. Never seen that since. So, the fact is, when we're talking about terminal ballistics, a lot of weird shit happens. Sometimes, again, it's like way on the far side of this is really gross. I'm not prepared to say one way or the other. I don't like what I need to know is what's the implication. Like if you're like, oh, this is not the wound that I expected. Well, then, okay, so what's the conspiracy there? We shot him with a lower caliber round, but we don't want you to know about that. Or, I don't know, like, where do we go from there? Okay. All right. Well, maybe they decided to replace 300 Win Mag with 223 that day. I don't know, but I know he's dead. I don't know. Like, are we saying that somebody else shot him? Like, I don't know where to go from there. But again,
to me, it's just puzzling because I trust the people saw his hair fly up, and that audience reaction is like, ooh, yeah. I'm pretty sure he got hit. I was just surprised. I just don't have an answer for it. I was surprised not to see that spray, because by the time people 100 feet away are going, ooh, there must have been something to notice, right? But I did talk with a guy who was a trauma medic like, is it possible for his heart to keep pumping after his head's been basically eviscerated? And the answer is yes. Because a lot of people are saying, oh, look at all the blood that flowed out of him, but his head's too intact. How does that make sense? And the answer is his head could have been completely scrambled. Like, bullet went in, came out, overpressured the whole thing, transcentorial herniation, brainstem lockout, and his heart will still pump for the next minute or so till it goes anoxic, and he could lose half his blood. So all that's actually consistent with what could happen. I was surprised by what I didn't see there. I was expecting something that I didn't see. That's all.
Yeah, a lot of times, again, just going off of experience, like a lot of times you'll see a guy get in the head and you just see a pink mist. What I would like to see, and I probably never get to see it, but I would like to see the back of his head. I would like to kind of see that. I like to do a little, the fact is terminal ballistics is a science into itself, and it's not always very predictable. And I think there's definitely, again, there's a spectrum of what you can kind of expect. And I think people need to realize that. And just because, Brandon Herrera or somebody else replicates something, they're not replicating what actually happened. I don't know that they know exactly what round the Secret Service are using. I don't think they know exactly where he hit and the angle at which he hit. There's a big difference if I get hit through the head and go straight through this way, or I get hit in the head like this, or I'm down and, it comes out the back of my back. Like bullets do weird things because body angle does weird things. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Take it for what it's worth. No questions, just encouraging. Thank you. Hey, thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. Which 92 Yankees supplied you with that important field display item? Hey, look, you got to keep some butcher block around. That's the old infantry guy in me. The locals were the first on the roof, saw the shells, counted them out. Body cam doesn't that also rule out second shooter? I mean, the problem here is that nobody trusts what they see, right? So we had, and Chris, feel free to speak to this, but it does kind of further the conspiracy theory when you see five. Now, this is very possible when you're getting up there and you're trying to take everything in. The first thing you're looking for may not be empty casings, right? So you come across the first five, and you count them out, and then there is like a 12-minute gap. I don't know what happened to that 12 minutes, and they find the other three. So I understand why people find that suspicious. What I will say is that when we see casings in two different locations, that does, in my mind, and maybe I'm just biased because that's a real possible. We all are to some extent. There's a theory that we think is more probable than others. But that does give credence to the idea that we had a significant amount of movement with that rifle. So you can say that they planted them, however you want to interpret that is going to be interpreted however you already see the world. I don't know what to say with that.
Gary, do you know how the brass was displayed? I had to squint at the helmet cam and freeze frame, and I was trying to count it up, but I never quite got satisfied if I know where it was.
I saw some brass. I never saw 8 rounds here, or, I didn't see anything definitive on that. So I'm sure, Chris, are you doing any Freedom of Information Act asking for local and federal law enforcement camera?
Not yet.
Okay. I think that's something that I definitely would be interested in pursuing. I think that'll help us get the story the fastest. And I think going after the local law enforcement camera information would be the easiest route, or the path of least resistance, and probably the most informative.
Well, I want the texts. I want the texts from the guys who were in that room who left the room. I want to know what they were saying.
The more information we get, the better. I do think that video evidence along with the text, because that is I find it funny, when we have, and I guess the stories, and I've heard a bunch of them, but I guess the story is like one guy that was in that room left, and we're talking about, for people who don't know, we're talking about the local law enforcement or the SWAT/ESU guys that were supposedly in like an overwatch position in that room, that they were supposed to be there. One just left, I guess, for personal reasons. The other one supposedly went downstairs, forgot his key card in there, got locked out. Is that what you heard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I guess there was a third guy. I don't know why he was gone. I don't have good explanation for any of that. So,
well, the third guy was supposed to go downstairs to let the other guy in, but the second guy went down because he was going to go look for this Crooks guy who was that concerned. But I'm like, do you guys have radios? Just like, hey, Bolo, here's the perp. And there's people everywhere. You know what bothered me a little bit from that Dave Smith one? He's down there, he's hunkering down, and there's a Stady and a Muni cop. They're both walking around, guns drawn, right? Shooting happens. He comes around the corner and there's 14 guys over there. Were they all in the break room? Like, where were they? Because they weren't around the west side. They weren't around the south side. I don't know where they were,
We don't have, and see, this is where things get a little convoluted, because we don't have answers to that, obviously. And there could be something suspicious, right? There could be something that supports a more grand conspiracy. But the problem is there's also just as likely a chance that they were just effing off, right? They weren't taking this job seriously. Nothing's going to happen. They're complacent. They've done lots of different events like this, and, they're down there smoking and joking. And what we're going to get is we're going to get obstruction just to cover their asses and to save face, so that they're not embarrassed about the fact that, like, we're down there Facebooking and we're looking at social media and watching YouTube while we're supposed to be out here actually paying attention to what's going on. And we just dropped the ball massively.
There's a guy on a metal roof running over our heads who took the shots. That's a little embarrassing. Professionally, I would think it's not a good moment.
It's super embarrassing at a minimum. And, that's another thing, whether they're local law enforcement or Secret Service, man, those people need to be held accountable. The other thing that I have heard, that I know that the mayor came out, I don't know what other information has come out on this, but I think the mayor came out and addressed the PD, and then, the sheriff, they talked about the fact that Secret Service didn't give them any specific security details or security responsibilities. I know the Secret Service came out when Cheadle basically said, hey, they were supposed to be covering this, whereas both the sheriff's office and the PD said that the only details or the only task that they were given was for parking. I don't know. And I think that's also possible. We had a half-ass advance. Responsibilities and duties weren't put in place, and now we're still going through the problems that caused. I mean, that's ultimately. Go ahead.
Even if Secret Service said, listen, we tasked municipal people or locals with that building complex up there, it's still that Secret Service's failure, right? That's their job. And by the way, somebody put it this way, and I'm like, oh, that captures it well. From Trump's stage to that building is a 9-iron.
100%.
That's Secret Service's job, full stop. If they task somebody and they failed at that, it's still their failure, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. With that being said, I do think that if, hey, look, we said we need you to cover this, and then we find that local law enforcement, we're just jerking, they should get fired too. Like, we need to hold everybody accountable. I'm with you. Ultimately, so, and this is one of the things that we talked about in the interview, is that with my friend that was a former counter sniper team member, he said, look, that is our responsibility 100%. And what we would normally do, or what we would typically do, was we'd make sure that we would have some sort of Secret Service in bed with local law enforcement, so that, number one, there's a direct line of communication. Number two, they're not only tasking stuff out, but they're overseeing that, because again, we can delegate authority, but not responsibility, right? So they are ultimately responsible to not only say, hey, this is your job, but I'm also putting somebody in place to make sure that you're doing the job that I've given you. So it is without a doubt their responsibility. Now, one thing that has been talked about, I keep seeing stuff over in the comments about drones, and I keep seeing that the Secret Service probably does have drones. And I know drones are all the rage, and we do a lot of things with drones. The thing that would have helped more than drones, that is very typical in an event like this, is they should have, and they typically do, if it's not Trump, if it's a Democrat, they have all kinds of security measures in place, but they typically have counter surveillance teams. So we have a bunch of people in plain clothes out in all these different areas that are not as secure, like the venue that we're talking about, right? That AGR building. That'd been a perfect spot to have counter surveillance teams. The other thing that they would typically have is counter sniper response teams. So what these folks are is one or two different agents that are out on the flanks and out in these areas where, when there's a question about somebody, they are physically going there with a local law enforcement contingent and investigating that situation, preventing it from happening. Because again, one thing that people need to realize in these events, it is not uncommon to have people climbing roofs to try to get pictures. It's not uncommon, people getting up in the trees. And so what you need is somebody on the ground. They say, hey, counter sniper response team 1, hey, I need you to go check out that tree over in your sector, right? And they go over there and they say, hey, you know what, it's just a kid up in the tree with some binos. You know, we told him to get down and whatever else. And, you know, during that interview, he gives me lots of examples where he used those that kept him from having to kill people, right? We can't just shoot anybody that's on a roof. And I know that's been one of the things I see time and time again. They're on a roof, they should have died. Well, man, counter sniper teams and the Secret Service be killing people all the time. Like, you still have to articulate a threat. So there's that. So counter sniper teams, counter sniper response teams should have been on the ground, embedded with local law enforcement, and counter surveillance teams should have been on board, so that what their job is threat detection. And they failed at all that. There was none of those resources available.
Well,
so
this is fascinating. In the Dave Stewart film, you're watching at a minute 30, 2 guys come around plainclothes. They're sweeping on the south side. They're clearing windows, doing a good job. And then the guy called ZZ Top comes around, big beard. So we had at least three undercovers on the west side. I'm like, well, what were they up to? Were they smoking and joking? Were they sitting in a car over there? I mean, like, because they were in a position where that lady's like, he's right there. He has a gun. And these guys came from the west. So I like, what were they up to? Like,
you know, I mean, those guys could have been off duty. I don't know. I don't know. They could have been doing 1,000 other things. I don't have a good answer for it. I tend to think, again, speculation. I tend to think that those were local, local plainclothes, undercover cops. I don't know if they were federal or not. I don't know. I don't think it, you know, but what we should have had is some counter sniper teams. We should have had embeds from the Secret Service. That is SOP, that is standard. But he also said, look, there's sometimes, especially during election season, where everybody spreads so thin, you're dealing with less assets. And again, you know, to the Fumbelina's credit, that one agent, at least she pushed for those counter sniper teams and continued to push for those. I've heard that she, you know, really kept saying, hey, look, we need these. So look, she sucks. She should be taken off any sort of duty and position where she is carrying a gun or needs to use a gun, because she doesn't know what the F she's doing. That is a fact. But with that being said, she probably also saved some lives out there. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Yeah, I like this. This is 100% true. And I hate ballistic gel stuff when we're talking about expecting exactly what, or trying to see exactly what, you know, the human anatomy we're going to do under gunfire. Ballistic gel is not a good analog for the human body. It has a certain density, but so bullets tend to, like, if 12 inches of human flesh, and again, even that gets a little weird, will react similarly to the way 12 inches of ballistic gel will, but even that's not exact. And then, you know, there's a lot more fluid inside the body. There's a lot of different factors there that ballistic gel is just, you can't expect what's happened to ballistic gel to also happen to human body. That's just, I don't know what to say about that. Some body cams have GPS, FOIA the body cam GPS files. I agree with that. Like, there's a lot of information I think that can be gleaned from FOIA requests. I'm sure there's all kinds of different media and podcasters and everything from Tucker Carlson to Benny Johnson to all these folks that are doing those things. And, you know, maybe Peak Posterity and Paramount Tactical Solution can help with that. I'll put some money toward that. Whatever the bill is, you send it to me, we'll get it done. Planned negligent, refused drone overwatch, left post. Again, look, drones are great. So I will tell you this. Right down the road from us is some of our instructors, our adjunct instructors, are Border Patrol. They're part of BORTAC, and there are instructors up at their main training facility in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. That's right where we're by. They had a hard time. They wanted to get drones, obviously, to train on drones for drone security on the border, amongst many other things. There are some challenges with that because we have all kinds of regulations in place where, like, for instance, DJI, completely built, assembled, programmed in China. All right. And there are some challenges to get some of that drone technology into government hands because of those regulations, for better or for worse. But ultimately, the real point here is that counter sniper teams would have done a better, our counter surveillance teams would have done a better job at detecting threats than a drone was. You know, a drone is not going to see underneath a tree. And this is the same reason why up on the highest position is not the best position. Going back to the water tower. If I am a counter sniper team, I want to see under awnings. I want to see inside windows. I want to see underneath the trees. I want to see these places where a sniper would actually be, not up above something to where I'm looking down and I can't see under basic coverage. You know, there are going to be people that are going to be, somebody knows what they're doing. They're going to be in the shadows. They're going to be under something typically. And so that's that. Plan negligence. Yeah. All right. So we covered that. Let me see if we got any other pertinent questions. I think that's pretty much it. You guys got like 8 seconds to throw up any super great questions that I'll pick from. There you go, Chris. I'm sure you don't get enough of these, but I'll throw this up here. Chris Martinson, where can you send some pictures?
Yeah, we're managing all this at info@peakprosperity.com. If it's actual evidence, please put that in the subject line. And if you're an expert who's going to provide you've got some expert influence on this or insight, put expert in the subject line, because we got I don't know, a couple thousand pieces of inquiry at this point in time. But sometimes people are just sending us their ideas and theories, and we need to separate those quickly if we can from evidence and experts.
I've looked into this a little bit. What's the deal with the Maxwell Urich, Chris?
I haven't gone deep on this one yet. He has a passing similarity on some pictures. Maxwell Urich is a famous sort of Antifa guy. It's kind of weird. I just came across this today, so put a big old grain of salt in this and then an asterisk next to that apparently his father is connected to something called Urich Arms or something like that. So he's got some connection out in Arizona, or Urich Armory. I forget what the exact name is. But this was the thing I'm going to have to chase down. Somebody said, oh, did you know that the James Copenhaver is actually connected to this Urich guy and the Urich family? And I'm not sure this is the same Urich family. I don't know. People are passing stuff around. There's supposed to be some connection there. But the original thing was a lot of people were speculating that wasn't Crooks. It was a guy named Urich. And then there's some connection. There's a white van that got towed and it had explosives in it, which is a big dangly thing in this that I haven't gone down yet because I have no data on that. I just have a press report that says explosives were found potentially wired to a remote detonator that looked like a garage door opener or something.
Yeah. The keypad to a garage door opener. Yeah, that's one of those things. When I start seeing that's well, I'll say this. One of the things that I started looking, somebody sent me, post-mortem of the shooter and then pictures of Urich. And there are pictures, basically pictures of Urich, and they're pointing out some different similarities with the dead shooter that I don't even know if that particular photo was manipulated in any way. But what I'll tell you is, like, to me, what I saw was like, that is definitely much closer to the picture that I'm looking at, because I had a picture of Crooks on there as well. I was like, I'm looking at Crooks, man. This is a dead Crooks to me. This looks nothing like this guy. I saw several physical characteristics that would completely rule out this Urich guy in my mind. But again, and look, I've done a lot of work on surveillance, counter surveillance. I definitely have a lot of time looking at pictures, trying to spot those guys in hats and training all this stuff and training people to look for certain characteristics on facial features, body composition, gait, height, skin tone, hair color, all these things. I'm pretty good at that. And I didn't see a similarity to this Urich guy. So I feel like that is whether it's just a left or people playing around or people's imagination going crazy or intent behind a government entity trying to distract people. That's what I feel like that is. I feel like that's a distraction, but take that for what it's worth.
Unless they've manipulated they photoshopped his ear. Crooks has one of the most distinctive ears I've ever seen. Right, with the two little knobs on it.
It's like very
knobs,
angles. Yeah, like very strange physiology on it that I've never seen before, and that was very clear and present in the post-mortem that I saw. So
the only thing that's weird, which I think you just picked up on, which did catch me, which was like, we've had nothing but blurred out photos to protect the decorum or something, but we got within 3 hours, we had that picture came out. And if you run that through a photo analyzer, somebody did do a little something to it. I don't know that I don't have data that they manipulated enough to actually Photoshop the ear, but they definitely ran it through something. And I think that's the kind of thing that's designed to throw you off, right?
I
Oh,
agree.
look, it's photo manipulated. Next thing you know, we spend hours analyzing something that is irrelevant.
100%.
But that somebody came out with that and decided to throw a little something into the punch bowl 3 hours later, that's a tell all on its own, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think, that should be able, we should be able to get some things like that from a FOIA request.
Mhm.
And hopefully that'll again eliminate some of the variables that we're looking at. To some extent, again, even if we got all that evidence, there would be still questions of, hey, did the FBI manipulate this? That's what the other thing everybody's saying, all these people that turn in their phone, now they got their phone back. Well, yeah, the FBI manipulated the audio, the video, okay, so where are we? Where are we? Like, what do we have left that it's even sort of solid? If we don't have this, like, where can we start? So I don't know, but I think you're doing God's work, Chris. So I want to thank you for all your efforts on this, and anything that we can do together to continue pushing this and making sure
Absolutely.
that the government is held accountable. You got my phone number, you know where to reach me. I'd love to meet you up at PA. We do some analysis on site. I think that would be really good. And
I love that.
yeah, so that'd be great. Well, listen, folks, we have taken up Mr. Martinson's time, Dr. Martinson's time. And I appreciate you coming on, Chris. I really do. And I appreciate all you guys over in the comments, everybody viewing this.
Likewise.
Down in the links below, if you're not following us on social media, obviously YouTube and Rumble, but also Facebook, Instagram. We do some cool things on there. We also have a newsletter down below. I'm sure you can go to Chris's site. I'm sure they have all kinds of links. Do you guys have a newsletter? Any other social media that you want to share before we kick everybody off here?
Peakprosperity.com. We got a great community. So for anybody worried about how to become resilient, that's my day job. I care about getting people up the curve so that they're ready for what's about to come, and great community of people. So peakprosperity.com. And then otherwise, yeah, YouTube, all that. It's my name, easy to find.
Yeah, and for those of you, again, if you're serious about learning how to defend yourself, again, we offer tactical carbine courses, handgun courses, medical courses, driving courses, low light courses, night vision courses, long range courses. We offer it all. And yeah, so go to ParamountTactical.com. Go check out our upcoming training schedule. We'd love to have you out. Also, down below, we have a free newsletter. We don't spam you. We don't give your information out to anybody. We try to do things right here. So appreciate everybody showing up. Chris, really appreciate you. Stand by. We will get it off. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.